Three, two, one. What is up, everybody? You are listening, you're watching to the Constant Elevation Podcast. I am your host, Gabe Rock. This is going to be a fun episode. This is going to be a fun episode because I have so many other things, like random, not normal content, episode content stuff I'm going to be covering, but it is what it is. And because I'm in a good place. This is a great place. I will start off saying happy belated belated birthday to my fellow airmen. We celebrated 77 years as an independent service after we broke away from the Department of the Army. And so proud to have, I actually thought about it when I was first joining Air Force ROTC back in Northern Arizona University. We ended up, I think as soon as I came on, we ended up celebrating like the 50th anniversary. It was a big deal. I remember I was like, oh, what's happening now? It's like, oh, it's the 50th birthday of the Air Force. And if I did all the public math, that means I've been doing this thing for like 27 years. It's pretty dope as far as how long I've been doing this Air Force thing and had this haircut. And so it definitely has been a great ride, and I'm enjoying every day of it. So I just want to say happy birthday, Air Force. A couple other things just as an update from last week. Okay, so this is in my opinion, a great story. Last week I did mention I'm going to be taking my Air Force PT test, and so I took it on Tuesday. For those who may or may not be tracking, I actually record my episode content on Thursdays, release it on Sunday, but I took my PT test on Tuesday. So I signed up to take it at 7 o'clock in the morning, did my push-ups and sit-ups, maxed those out, easy stuff. And then I ended up doing the hammer race. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically the pacer test for some of the Utes out there, where you have the beep and you have to run the 20 meters in a shrinking time frame at increased speed. And so when I completed it, my interpretation, this is already the fact that the story is starting as my interpretation of the guidance, is that I thought I could actually take a break and I get 3 strikes, and assuming that I reset my 3 strikes on the 3rd time, I get brand new set of strikes and I keep on going. So I ended up already getting to level 8, and I was like, all right, cool. I'm running, and I'm going to make sure that I can complete more. So I decided to, instead of when the beep happened, I just stopped and didn't run at all. I just stood there and then let another beep go. And then as soon as that happened, I started to run. I'm like, yeah, in my head, I'm going to reset these 3 strikes and make sure that I can keep on going. So I keep on running. I think I got into either completed high level 8 or maybe the first levels of 9. In any case, so I ended up getting at that point in time a score of 98.5. And I was like, all right, cool. And as soon as I did it, one of the LTs that was there, I found out, not even a UFPM or a PTL, just being a good officer. He was like, I don't really know if that counts, sir. I was like, okay, that's cool. Noted, I'm signing some shit. I'm going to sign something. And so one of the NCOs came over, he had my score sheet. He was like, all right, sir, here's what you got. You got a 98.5. I'm like, all right, cool. Signed it. But then I also said, hey, if we need to readjust this because the rules say so, because I didn't check the rules, but if all of a sudden something needs to be readjusted, I'm good with that. Make sure that you come and tell me. And so fast forward a couple hours, I had my celebratory McDonald's meal. If you know, you know. And then I ended up coming back from lunch, and then I was like, hey, so yeah, sir, my exec was like, yeah, sir, we have to make sure that CYS called up and said they're going to have to readjust your score sheet, and you actually got a 95. I was like, okay, cool. But I'm not going to I'm going to have fun with this. And so I ended up telling him, he's like, all right, well, tell him to come back, and then around 1 o'clock, and then we'll figure the whole thing. So I come back, and then it's 1 o'clock. They're there at 12:50, like good airmen as they should. They're early, not early, which means on time. So they're like, hey, sir. And I walk past them like, hey, and I beeline it to my door. And I yell from my office, Chief, need you to come in here real quick. LT, you too. So they come in here, and I was like, just be cool. Chief, I need you to follow my lead. LT, I want you to tell them to report into this office in 30 seconds. He's like, what? I was like, no, tell them to report in. Knock and fucking report in like a regular airman. And so he closed the door, went outside, and told them to report. I sat down, cleared all the things off my desk. They reported in, they knocked, they squared their corners, they reported in, and I said, and I had the most stoned face. I had to really, really work hard because I have often failed the bearing test. And so I had to dial it in. And so I was like, after we have this conversation, you're going to immediately report to your DO and then back brief your squadron commander when she returns from TDY. Is that understood? Yes, sir. And I started having conversations about like, all right, well, there's interpretations and guidance and trying to understand how these things can happen. And I know my fitness level and stuff like that. And then I said, I'm pretty sure if I get a 95, this is going to be the lowest PT score I've ever had in my entire Air Force career. And I'm very glad this is going to happen today. And I got up and I said, thanks, gents. I appreciate you guys holding me accountable to the actual rules. And then I felt, or for them anyway, I'm pretty sure they're like coming down, oh God. And I was like, yep, this is fine. I was like, no, you guys are good. Honestly, you're good. And I told them that I was very, very proud of them for actually holding the standard and having enough sand to be like, they could have easily, well, the colonel said he got a 98, so he got a 98. Like, no, they're actually right. I'm the one that interpreted the guidance according to what I thought it was. When I say interpreted, I didn't even look. I just assumed that I could do what I could do, and that I was completely wrong. And so they even like debriefed me. They're like, yep, sir, here's the AFI. Here's the exact thing that says you can't actually do that. You're supposed to be running and actually make it to the next thing. I was like, oh, okay, cool. You're totally right. And they're like, sir, this was actually a diagnostic since you're not due until October. So if you wanted to redo the test, you could. I was like, no, I don't give a fuck. I'm good. I'm past excellent. If I was king for a day, for me, this mandatory standards or whatever it is, our PT test would just be, did you pass or fail? That's it. There's no more like excellent and all these other shenanigans. Like, no. Did I pass or fail? That's it. Unpause. That's my personal opinion. Lesson learned for, I hope to, and I really, really hope that and I was very, very proud of these two airmen. It was a young lieutenant and a young staff sergeant. It was very important for me to tell them that I was very proud of them for what they did. They could have easily just made sure that like, well, the colonel said what he said and it is what it is. Like, no, they were in the right. I was not. And I'm glad that I got called out. And that's what we're talking about, standards. That's what we're talking about, is maintaining, the high standards we should have, and this is something that we should be proud of as airmen. And it happened this week, and I was very, very satisfied and happy with how the entire thing transpired. And so I had a little bit of fun because I can do what I want, but like, I do hope that they share their stories. I've been told they have shared their stories in their formations, and I want them to understand, like, no, they were right. If you know what you're talking about and you've done the research and you understand what you're doing, I expect you to make sure that you are calling out anybody who's making sure if they are not adhering to the standards, you call them out. So shout out to those airmen in CYS, and I'm proud to serve next to all of you. So that was just a fun story that happened this week. This week though, also, I did get the topic I want to talk about this week was inspired from one of the comments I saw on the Book of Faces, and it was talking about the context was talk about the generational divide that happens in the workplace. And so we have 4 different generations that are working in the Air Force. Some people say 5, but I'll say 4. And so I didn't want to like water down the conversation to the point where like, well, one generation is better than the next. And that's a very easily, you can say millennial, Gen Z, Gen X. That's too easy content. It's too easy to say which generation is going to be the best. To me, it's more interesting to say, how do we actually lead complex situations, and how do we articulate and try to get to the best way to kind of traverse these difficult terrain and get to an actual positive place, preserving the team aspect of it all. And I think that's actually way easier said than done. Our formation in AFTAC happens to have a very nuanced kind of formation. So we have some civilians who've been there for a very, very long time, who may have been military at one point in time, came back, they're so familiar with the terrain and the mission, they love it, and they want to come back and serve in a different capacity. We have contractors as well as part of our team spaces. We have a large amount of enlisted and officers who often do repeat tours at AFTAC. So this is actually interesting, just kind of being in the situation. And we have the very similar thing happening in AFCyber, but it's not as focused as it happens here at AFTAC. And so what I wanted to talk about was mainly the thing of, I've heard, actually it was mentioned during a recent town hall, as far as there's actually like a civilian military kind of friction. I was like, oh, okay, well, keep talking. What are you talking about? And what they were talking about is just their perceptions. And perceptions, although they are depending on, they could be reality for depending on who's looking at them. But I took all these data informations and I saw it was very, very interesting. So from the civilian to the military perspective, I've heard, and again, I'm going to say these comments as very overarching generalizations, but I'm going to offer my recommendation how to overcome this. There's an overarching generalization that civilians think the military are just, they're here, they're not really vested in the whole thing because they're only here for a certain amount of time, or they're so young, because we have a lot of young enlisted in our spaces, that they don't know what they're doing. It's just easier for me to do it myself as a senior ranking civilian, either senior ranking in time and experience, or senior ranking in actual position. And so you just have like this, it's a looking at the Utes, I'll call it that, because it's just trying to overgeneralize it, that the Utes don't know what they're doing because they're just off there doing their own thing, and I understand what they're doing it. Part of it is they just see like this generalization of the military just not here. They're just, I don't know, they're getting themselves out of work. There's actually a large amount of requirements that the military formation are responsible for, so they have to. It may not be their direct day-to-day day-to-day responsibilities, but it is inherent. If you wear the uniform, you have certain responsibilities you have to do. You have all the training you have to do, your physical fitness standards, your training, your professional military education. There's a lot of things that the institution of the Air Force expects of you, and we actually provide it to you. So yes, you're going to be out of the office, not doing your primary function, but this is what we corporately expect of you as a Big A airman to complete. And potentially for some civilians, they see that as getting out of your primary duty, getting out of work. I don't agree or disagree with it. All I'm saying is that is a perspective. On the other side, you can see that there is a, from the military and potentially the younger enlisted perspective, where they see their civilian, senior civilian teammates just saying like, well, they're just so set in their ways and they won't actually teach me how to do anything because they want to hog all that corporate knowledge and they just want to do things themselves. And I've heard this parallel but different perspective of, well, they've earned this place to be a senior civilian. They could be a GS 13 or 14 or some other, a higher ranking position than a junior enlisted. And they're not carrying their weight. They've just been here so long and they actually know the code and know how to do these certain things because they've administered this very unique organic system that only is a one of one, only exists here. And so they sort of don't have to pull their own weight because they're actually the only ones that knows how to administer this unique system. So their managerial, their project management experience, those responsibilities, they are not performing those, and the younger enlisted force is actually getting jaded because like my higher ups are not doing what they're being paid to do. Again, so that's going to be very overgeneralizations as far as what's going on in formation. So here's how, as I hear this, here's my if you go to constantelevation.co, you'll see a couple more episode notes as far as what are my recommendations, how to tackle this. Because I do think this potentially is a common thing in a multi-generational workplace. And so here's what I would do. One thing that I thought about is just teamwork. It's interesting because we have the junior enlisted and senior civilian just kind of being at this friction point. Like, you guys realize you're on the same team, right? You're actually in the same squadron. I don't even understand how you can have friction in the same team, but that's beside the point. And so thinking about the team aspect, this is a reason why I love being part of, I love coaching. I love being part of team sports because I just feel that like I gravitate more towards team sports versus individual sports. And part of that is because I think you have I like the idea of I'm responsible as somebody else, because I see the other side of that someone's going to pick me up if I'm actually kind of not performing to the point where I need to be. And I love that. I love that idea of I'm accountable and responsible to somebody else in my formation. And so I think I started to think about, that's actually why I believe is one of the solution sets for this problem of a friction within internal of a team. The first part I'm going to talk about is just public accountability, right? And so the idea of understanding and this is in my current position, I can and should not influence this down at a squadron. I would say someone in at that level of the formation should actually be implementing these tactics. And so take this as, how would you do this at a work center level kind of a formation? I think if you start to measure your own progress as a team. So in other words, you have to actually start with saying your progress, your scoreboard, how you measure success as a team is a team sport. So in other words, you prioritize and start listing out, like, here are the team goals we're looking for. It's a project. It's a goal that's not tied to one person, as actually is a measurable thing that you can actually tie to something bigger, to the work center or to flight or squadron. Make sure you're aware of your scoreboards that are very, very public. And then you start talking about like, how do we achieve progress towards this as a team? There should be certain things, and you're gonna reveal that like everybody has a certain portion of the process in order to make progress towards that goal. Like, in other words, very similar to like football, right? And so if the Arizona Cardinals, who finally won their first game, shout out to them, they're beating LA Rams, that whole team of 11 that are on the field, they all have to do their part in order to score a touchdown. You have the offensive line doing, I will freely admit I'm not that much of a sports fiend, but I can sort of make analogies. My wife actually, Gina, I was going to buy her. She told me that at her school they have Spirit Day. It's a sports day. She wants a shirt that says, I just hope both teams have fun. And that is exactly the vibe that my wife has. Anyways, if you're a football team or a basketball team or any sports team, you have a certain number of players contributing to the exact drawn up play, and it only works if everybody does their job. Same thing happens in the workplace, that a supervisor should be doing their job as a supervisor, managing the project, overarching, managing the resources, managing the timelines. If you're a technician on the line, you'll be doing your job, making sure that you're tuning that sensor, making sure that you're applying that process or application to make sure you are managing vulnerabilities across the enterprise system. Just do your job. If everybody does their job within a team sport, you could actually result in a score. Who doesn't want that? But I feel sometimes some of this friction is that people are like, well, you're not necessarily, this person is not actually pulling their weight. Okay, well then there's a way to not necessarily target them if you choose not to be confrontational. And there's certain instances where it pays off to be confrontational and not. But if you keep the team scored on the team score, arguably, it's kind of like the same thing, like many hands. I'm gonna ruin this phrase. Many hands raise the boat. There's something to be said about people inherently, I believe, do not want to be the weakest link in the chain. They don't want to be that portion of that failed. So when you start managing and shaping your environment to make sure that you are actually where most invested in the team's success, that's where they can't hide anymore. Because it's going to be very blatantly obvious that someone's not performing to their either assigned roles and up to the potential, and most people do not want that. They're going to just naturally respond to try and carry their weight and make sure they're doing part of the process because they don't want to be seen as the weakest link. And so that would be my recommendation when you witness that there are some internal workforce kind of friction points, that you kind of take a step back, go a little bit higher, look at the larger team perspective. How can you influence the environment to be like, remember team, this is what we're focusing on. I'm not talking about individual performance directly. What I'm saying is we need to work as a team. You can actually positively influence them. And because I believe people naturally do not want to be the weakest link, and their behavior will start to change. And so that could be where the civilian starts to, in this instance, the civilian starts to kind of share some of their knowledge. Their responsibility is not to just kind of pigeonhole everything onto their own, because the whole team is lagging because of their actions. So they start to kind of spread that knowledge or be able to do their job. Like, oh, I'm responsible for the project management and the deliverable because I'm going to be held accountable to that. Therefore, I'm going to make sure I deliver. There's a way to do that. I've done that previously in my job. On the enlisted side, it's a thing of you may actually have these other military responsibilities, but that's not an excuse to just kind of let your primary job go to shit. And so you make sure that you have to figure out your time management skills to carry your own weight, because again, you as the airman also don't want to be part of the problem. You want to be part of the solution. So just think about that when you keep the teamwork aspect first and foremost in your mind. I truly believe then you can actually start achieving team success versus the individual success. You start overcoming all of these weird generational or civilian, military, contractor, officer. It doesn't really matter. We're all supposed to be focused on winning as a team. So make sure you focus on that. So that's what I want to share about this week. Also have, before I conclude this week's episode, still have important news. And I mentioned it last week that I'm going to be excited to launch the ConstantElevationStore.com. Again, it's going to be merch similar to like this. We got my Constant Elevation logo. You got some t-shirts, you got some stickers. You even got some bullet journals based on my last week's episode. So the launch date is going to be September 23rd. Yep, that's going to be the Monday, like right after this episode comes out on Sunday. You can go to ConstantElevationStore.com constantelevationstore.com and actually support the channel by picking up some merch. We got stickers, we got shirts, we got all kinds of other stuff there. I've been designing all of those products personally, and so very, very excited to kind of launch this next step of where Constant Elevation is going to go. It is true, can't stop, won't stop, and more products and other things are going to be released from here just for my own mind and being inspired as a creative person and a content creator, what I like to do. So yeah, if you're interested in supporting the channel, please head to constantelevationstore.com to pick up some merch. As always, you can hit up constantelevation.co for all of this free podcast content, as well as some resources for you to rise to your potential, not only as an individual, but for your team responsibilities as well. So team, I think this is probably going to be, I'm heading back home to Hawaii for some family business the last week of September. So I'm not going to bring any of my stuff so I can focus on my family there. I'm looking forward to seeing my family in Hawaii and also visiting our daughter in Arizona. So there will not be an episode after that. But again, please visit constantelevationstore.com to support the channel. And until a few weeks, I will talk to you soon in October. Take care of yourselves. Peace.